So changing your past doesn't mean that you can no longer recognize what happened to that other person or in your exchange with that other person. It's not like that version of yourself disappears. It's simply that you're adding on to yourself different realities, different options, and you realize that the frequency of consciousness that you're embodying now is not that past that you remember, that experience that you remember is not directly part of the being you are now. It's part of the alternate being that you could be, but you're no longer that. Nevertheless, from the unconditional love version of yourself that you are now, the version of yourself which is closer to unconditional love than the previous version, you can have even more understanding of how that sort of works. You can have more inclusion of the idea that you did, in some exchange some hurt back and forth between each other. Or maybe it was just a one-way street. And by seeing that as inclusive of, yes, that is that's part of what happened in that exchange, that's part of what happened in their experience. So there can be a kindness and acceptance and an inclusion of that, even though you realize that that's no longer directly your past. It's no longer the past of the one that you right now are. It's caused by the version of yourself that you were, that you chose to be at that moment. So you can include that vision, you can include that memory, but you no longer have to feel guilty about it. And without guilt, you can be even more kind, you can be even more loving, you can be even more healing. Because if you feel guilty, you're only going to hurt yourself, and you're only going to deprive yourself of the spacious energy that love brings with it, and the presence that it brings with it. So as you can stay present, seeing that all different realities are in fact sort of illusory, optional, valid points of view of the one reality, but none of them is more real than the other. You can hold more and more of these at the same time whenever required, whenever relevant. And as you're able to hold the space for these points of view to be validated, yet not necessarily sympathized for as you used to, nevertheless they can be validated. There is much more room, there's much more space for healing, for forgiveness, for apologies, maybe where appropriate, for clarity, and sometimes maybe no apologies, even though the other person may want you to apologize, if it really does not feel authentic to you to apologize, then maybe not. Nevertheless, you will have the kind, compassionate space to allow for both of these ideas to be resolved, to be experienced. So in the end, what it does, when you allow yourself to change into the version of yourself you wish to be, what happens is that you become more naturally, more and more compassionate, more and more loving, in tune with unconditional love. Because, again, as you see that you're able to switch from one moment to the next, as you see that all realities are in fact available to you, it takes away the idea of I need. And when we're no longer perceive ourselves as lacking beings, as being in need of something from the outside, then we'll naturally be overflowing, regardless of what version of ourselves we chose to be. Love will come with this, because it's not a running away. We only need to run away and avoid and say, oh no, that was not me, I didn't do that, that was my other self doing that. You know, you only have to say that if you feel like you're lacking fulfillment now. If you're completely fulfilled now, you don't need to compensate for that. You don't need to alter people's process in order to feel better about yourself. So the more freedom you give yourself, the more you're actually able to hold space for all these points of view, yet without identifying yourself as anyone in particular, or as the one that you prefer at this moment, but not to the exclusion of all other points of view. It is through inclusion that we gain more freedom. Through inclusion that we gain more integrity, more love, and more freedom for ourselves. So in that sense, shifting yourself always comes with greater, every version you shift into comes with a greater sense of wisdom and love and integrity and compassion. If that's not the case, if you're becoming in a sense more exclusive, more conflicted, more arrogant, but not in a good way arrogant, you can maybe look into how you're still running away from an idea of oh, if I don't run away from the other reality, then that means I'm lacking. Then that means something about me. You still feel lack in that old reality. That's why you feel the need to run away from it at the expense of other people's freedom. Or at the expense of respect and validity.